Welcome back to Breaking Bet, everybody, here on this Friday, January 17th. This is a big day for me. This is the first podcast of Breaking Bet previewing the new college baseball season, and we're taking an early look at the MLB Draft, potential risers and fallers, Golden Spikes candidates, who you like to win the World Series, the College World Series. I got my guy, Joe Doyle. Nobody better in the business than Mr. Joe Doyle from FSS Plus talking about prospects. Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time today, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, man, always a pleasure to jump on with you. A little preseason college baseball, talk a little Golden Spikes. I'm here for it.
So obviously we spoke. I don't think we spoke before the season last year. I don't know if our schedules, I think, were conflicting, so I couldn't get you on here last year. But 2 years ago, entering the 2023 season, I had you on. It was a smashing success. You talked about Wake Forest as that team that can make the run this year. Their pitching was loaded. Their lineup was disgusting. They have numerous first rounders. And even though they didn't win, they were one win away, and they lost because of Trey Morgan played an infield bunt perfectly, and Paul Skeens just was able to outlast Rhett Lauder in maybe the best pitching matchup, regardless of level, I've ever seen in the sport of baseball.
It's close. It was really close. Yeah, I wonder what that team wouldn't look like if some guys stayed healthy. Nick Kurtz was hurt for that series. Teddy McGraw went down. I mean, they had some names that were out for that series that I think would have made a pretty big difference. But that was an all-timer, that 2023 College World Series. You can only kind of hope that we get that sort of drama this year.
Yeah, it was sickening to me because I was on the wrong side of that one. They had two chances to win one game, and they couldn't do it. And honestly, I'll never get over it. I'm sick over it. And of course, Florida State last year had to collapse against Tennessee, and they don't get that third strike call against Blake Burke. But you know what, man? This year, we're in it for a bounce back. I've identified 3 teams that I see above the rest. I have 4 teams in my tier 1 of teams that I think have more than a realistic shot to win, that I would expect if one of these 4 teams is not in the College World Series finals this year, I would be shocked. So without further ado, Joe, talk to me about this year's College World Series contenders and pretenders, who you like, who you're fading.
So I'll start with 2 teams that I think are entirely unsexy from a drama standpoint. I'm all in on LSU and Tennessee. I think both of the 2 teams reloaded. I think they've both got enough offense to do a lot of damage this year. Tennessee in particular. But I want to speak really quickly on LSU, man. This is a team that didn't have the pitching they needed last year to make a deep run. And I think everybody knew it coming into this season, and they fell short. They fell short, way earlier than a lot of people expected. But, this year they bring back Cade Anderson, who should be a potential top 2-round guy, lefty with 4 pitches. Chase Shores is going to be healthy this year. They bring in Anthony Ianson and Jacob Myers. A couple of transfer portal guys. Devin Sheeran comes in from Mountain Lake St. Mary's. They've just got a lot of arms, dude. Connor Ware, apparently, a southpaw out there that was
from Auburn, right?
Was hit or miss last year. They've just got a lot of dudes. Chandler Dorsey, Jaden Newt, they've just got options this year. And I they leaned so heavily last year on true freshmen. Notice everybody that I just mentioned is not a freshman. I didn't bring up William Schmidt. I didn't bring up some of the other kids that they brought on campus. They're 8 or 9 arms deep this year. I think if you combine the arms race that they've got with the Daniel Dickinsons and the Chris Stanfields and Jared Jones, who might hit 40 this year, they've got the pieces. They've got the pieces to make a deep run. So that's where I would start. I'm just going to jump right over to Tennessee as well, because I think those two teams lump into one another. I think Tennessee's got more offense than what LSU does, but what Tennessee might not have is the amount of arms that LSU has. Now, if AJ Russell can stay healthy this season for Tennessee, he's got a chance to be one of the first 3 college arms off the board. It's first round stuff. It's outlier, unique, crazy release traits. Like he's a dog. And then you got Liam Doyle, you got Nate Snead, You got Marcus Phillips, Tanner Franklin. Like, they've got enough arms to get there. But I really like Tennessee's offense, man. Dean Curley's going to take over the thump in the number 3 hole that Christian Moore departs. Gavin Keelan is in from Louisville, and he just puts the game in motion. I love that sort of player. And then Andrew Fisher and Reese Chapman, man, they can bring it home. So those would be the 2 teams. I wouldn't say that they're my favorites, but A&M and some other teams look really good. But those 2 teams I always get stuck on because they've got volume and they've got game changers.
They also have Hall of Fame coaches, and
they do.
Coaching matters in every sport, but when it comes to college baseball, and people don't understand this because they think of MLB, MLB managers kind of get lost in the sauce a lot of the time. It's only really magnified come postseason time a little bit, but college baseball, because you're dealing with amateurs, and I mean, anybody that watches the sport can say baseball in and of itself is the highest variant sport out there. But then go to college, you're dealing with amateurs. You're dealing with 18, sometimes 17-year-old kids that aren't used to this spotlight and this moment, dealing with this competition that they faced before. So that's why they're always there. I'll start with Tennessee. I think Tennessee is always a threat to go back, always a threat to win. I think their lineup is still going to be very good. I think their pitching has a lot of potential. Considering what they lost Christian Moore, they lost Blake Burke, they lost Billy Amick, they lost Drew Beam, AJ Causey. They lose all these guys that were pivotal contributors in the College World Series last year, but they're still loaded. The reason why I wouldn't bet them, aside from the fact that they're the favorite everywhere at plus 750 and this early in the season before it even starts, I would never bet that, is because it's so difficult to win back-to-back World Series. Yeah. It hasn't been done since 2010, 2011, South Carolina, and the game has changed so much from 15 years ago. But nevertheless, in that tier 1 of mine, Tennessee is in there just because of the pedigree and because of the coach. Tony V is all time, and because of the talent. The 2 teams I really, really love this year, 2 of my 3, Texas A&M, obviously, the Aggies. It
seems like such a layup, though, doesn't it? I mean, it
does.
They're loaded.
It's like comical how loaded they are. They kind of
That's why I don't bring them up.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, they kind of remind me of that 2022 Tennessee team. Maybe they don't have as deep a pitch, but offensively, the Aggies. It was so weird because they lose the College World Series, and after that, we hear about Jim Schlossnagle, who's like, "No, I'm never leaving. I'm never leaving." Then, like 5 minutes later, he picks up and he goes to not only just any program, but he goes to Texas, the in-state arch rival. And from that point on, everybody was going to transfer. Lavalette was going to be gone. Grahovac was going to be gone. All these guys. Prager was probably going to go to the MLB draft. But Michael Early, as a first-year head coach, somehow wrangled in all that talent and said, "Hey, don't go anywhere. We're running it back." Not only that, he picks up 2 monster transfers for his offense. Wyatt Hensler from UPenn, who is the all-time leader in the Ivy League in home runs. Gavin Cash, who is a certified stud over at Texas Tech, kind of getting his talent wasted in a team that wasn't really going to compete. So he brings those guys in. He brings in a couple of other guys, Jamal George as a freshman, and a few others. So I think Texas A&M, with that revenge factor and the fact that their team is so loaded, this is a team that I believe in, like a lot of other people. And of course, they could fall short. I have questions about their pitching. It's concerning they lose one of the best closers in the game, and Evan Aschenbeck, and Chris Cortez is gone. Now they kind of have to retool that bullpen, even though they do have some pieces. And what does Early look like in his first year? How is he gonna be in the big moments? You have to have a coach that has a feel for the game and has his finger on the pulse. Those are intangibles you cannot measure until you get to that point. But Texas A&M for me is going to be one of my top teams this year, for that regard. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the players. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. And the reason I don't bring up A&M is, what are the odds? They're pretty short right now, right?
Pretty much 10-1 everywhere. So they're the second. They're the second
10-1. That's not. I mean, I honestly was expecting 6-1. I was expecting like plus 600. That's pretty good odds for an A&M. I'm not, as you know, I'm not a huge bettor. I do partake here and there, but it's not something that I pay attention to too much. If you're getting 10-1 odds on A&M, that's pretty good for a team that rolls, is running it back with pretty much the exact same roster that came this close to getting it done last year. So I can't argue with you there. Let me ask you this. It's a team that we haven't brought up, and maybe it's a team that you're going to bring up. So I apologize if I'm jumping in front of you. Where are you at on Arkansas?
Yeah, so Arkansas was a team I really liked preseason last year. And by the way, Arkansas's odds are 11-1 right now, and they were about 10-1, 11-1 coming into last year. Kind of like right in that Texas A&M boat as one of the front runners. I loved Arkansas last year. I thought their offense would be able to absorb some of the hits they took from the 2023 season. And, obviously it was going to be a team that was carried by pitching. Hagen Smith was probably the best pitcher in the country last year. The kid's going to be a dog in the major leagues. They had numerous bullpen pieces, and they're reloaded this year. But until I see their offense really perform at that level, I can't buy into Arkansas. You lose Hagen Smith, even though they have the pitching, and they always have the pitching under Dave Van Horn. I mean, you can't replace that guy. Like, I love Zach Root from ECU. He was very good, but he's going from the AAC to the SEC. Gabe Gackle, no issues of him. Gage Wood, Landon Beischeitels, some of these other guys they have, I think they're going to be able to pitch really well, as they always do. But I need to see that offense first. And considering that they always seem to choke in the postseason, especially in the regionals, to teams that have no business beating them, that's the other bugaboo for me with the Razorbacks.
Yeah, man, I'm in the same boat. I think they're going to have a top 10 rotation, a top 5 rotation in college baseball this year. I mean, you mentioned Gabe Geckel, certified dog, Zach Root, Landon Beetleshees, Gage Wood. They're going to pitch, and they're going to win a lot of games, like 7-2. I believe that. And Christian Fouch has the chance to be one of the more dominant, multi-inning relievers in college baseball this year. My question marks on Arkansas, I'm a little surprised they're getting the preseason love that they are getting, because from a prospect standpoint, and listen, Dave Van Horn is one of the best coaches in the country in terms of putting the cogs, the gears in place to make the engine run. But the top guys that I have coming out of Arkansas this year, 4 of them are transfers. 5 of them are transfers. I mean, Charles Davalon, Justin Thomas, Brent Iredale, Camden Kozil, Rocco Pepe, all of these guys are going to Fayetteville. Kendall Diggs is back, and Kendall Diggs is a very, very good player. But I think you're leaning really hard on a Ryder Helfrich jump and Nolan Souza to not swing and miss as much as he has in the past. So I'm with you. I question whether or not Arkansas is going to be a top 30, top 40 offense in college baseball. Now, if those JUCO transfers and Kozil and Pepe and they all come together like a well-oiled machine, they're as good a bet as anybody in college baseball to raise the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, as we've seen countless times, you need pitching when you get to Omaha, especially when you lose a game you're not expected to lose, a wrinkle gets thrown into it. Now it sets your pitching back because you have to climb out of a loser's bracket. You have to go on a 3-game or 4-game winning streak to hoist that trophy or even make it to the next round. And that's one thing that Arkansas has as almost as well as anybody this year. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up LSU, because LSU, it's Texas A&M, LSU as 2 of my 3 teams that I'm betting on to win it all right now. We'll get to the third one in a moment here. But LSU, I liked LSU last year. I was not surprised with they were working in a lot of new players that it took them a little while to get going. They were losing these tune-up matchups early in the season, but they kind of got it going in the second half. Sort of honestly like the way Tennessee did in 2023 when they were slow to start and then they picked it up in the second half and were able to get that run. I mean, LSU was a blown game away from moving on to the Super Regionals. And I actually saw a podcast, Joe. I forget what the name is, so I apologize. But basically he said, if LSU had made it to the Super Regionals, Chase Shores was going to come back. And one of the reasons why I really like LSU this year, in addition to all the stud transfers they brought in, the freshmen are insane. They have 3 of the top 10 freshmen for the 2027 class. I love Chase Shores this year. This is a guy who had some of the best stuff in college in 2023. For anybody that doesn't know, Chase Shores is a 6'8", 250-pound Haas that throws 100 miles an hour with an elite mix of other pitches. But his bugaboo was the strike zone. He struggled with command at times, but you saw the stuff was there, the swing and miss. He hasn't pitched since March of 2023. This is a guy who's expected to be a Friday night guy for LSU. This is a guy who I firmly believe is not getting the love in a lot of these mock drafts and, a lot of other stuff, that if he pitches to his caliber, not only is he going to be a first rounder, he's not only going to be possibly the first pitcher off the board, he could flirt with that number 1 status in a draft where the Washington Nationals, they can get Lavalette or Holiday, but they need a pitcher. And Chase Shores is that guy that could take that step. I'm not saying he's got the Paul Skeens type of stuff, but this is the kind of trajectory, a guy that's really not even thought of as a first rounder coming from last year to this year and makes that jump and surprises everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I can't argue with any of those points. He is a 6'8", 255-pound dude that throws 100. Like, there's no argument there. I think the fear from a scouting perspective and from a college baseball perspective is he is another like Bryce Cunningham from Vanderbilt last year, or honestly his teammate Grayson Carter, like just a big horse that has a big arm, but below average command, and the secondaries, while they exist, the feel for landing those in and around the strike zone where you need to land those will limit his ability to start at LSU. Now, that all being said, if Chase Shores, I rattled off so many LSU arms. If Chase Shores is their 7th, 8th, 9th inning guy, I mean, and he can just lock it down for 2 or 3 innings and doesn't blow up in the 3rd, 4th, 5th inning when he's being asked to do more than he has. I think the guy has like 8 innings in his collegiate career. I could be wrong. It could be more or less than that. That's just a number that's coming to my head. But if he ends up being the guy that's just ending the game after the 7th inning for LSU, as we've seen in college baseball over the last few years with Evan Ashenbeck, with Kevin Kopps, with, name the guy, you need the stopper. You need the guy that ends the game at the end of the game. And I think LSU is going to have to define who that is. And if it's Chase Shores, I think they're in a really, really good place. He doesn't need to throw 60 innings for me to buy LSU. If he throws, 32 innings and they're in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning in, May and June, they're in really good shape.
I was actually thinking of Gavin Guidry for that role. He's been there, done that.
I mean,
and big games in 23.
And that's why I lumped in the 7th and 8th innings. I think Chase Shores is going to be the guy that when Anthony Ianson goes 5 2/3, Chase Shores is in the 7th and the 8th inning. And if they need him, if he's hot, they need him in the 9th. Great. But Guidry's up to 97 with an absolute death ball curveball. And he's also the emotional leader of that team coming out of the bullpen. So yeah, they've got a couple of really good options in the bullpen. But I think honestly, if things are going the way Jay Johnson wants them to go, he'll have Chase Shores as the fireman. But we'll see. That's the nice thing about having 8 or 9 legit caliber arms is you can figure it out as you go. Yeah, you figure it out as you go.
I wouldn't even talk about their offense enough. I mean, you bring in some new guys here, but you got Jared Jones coming back with 28 bombs very quietly last year. Jared Jones is a guy that they call him Bear Jones, and he's as big as a grizzly bear. This kid is a freak of nature. You had Steven Monster Milam, who was just awesome in the conference tournament last year at the UNC regional. Derek Curiel, who's a big-time freshman, a guy who's going to be high up on the list in the draft board in 2027. Luis Hernandez had 23 home runs at Indiana State last year. Daniel Dickinson, you mentioned, 18 pops at Utah Valley. Blaze Priester, Ashton Larson, Jake Brown. I mean, you got Michael Braswell, who's kind of like, he's good and he's going to be productive, but he's also like that offensive emotional leader. Good in the field, like overall. I know he had a couple errors that were meaningful, but he's made some big plays, man. It's just Keita Rambade, I didn't even talk about. There's just so much talent on this LSU team. And I think when I'm comparing it, because I was going back between Texas A&M and LSU, like which team do I like more? I think A&M has the much higher floor. And while their ceiling is as high as anybody's, I think LSU does have that Texas A&M ceiling. But I don't think their floor right now is as high as A&M because there's a lot of what ifs. They got a lot of horses from different schools. They brought in a ton of talented freshmen. So you got to wait to see those guys click. And listen, if they got off to a little bit of a slow start again, it wouldn't surprise me. But this team with Jay Johnson as coach, just the amount of arms they have, somebody's going to step up. This is a team I firmly believe at 12-1, by the way, which is the best number you can find on them right now, is a team that's going to be making a deep run this time in June.
You know what we haven't talked about with LSU, and it's my biggest question mark on the team? Who's going to play shortstop?
That's a good one.
It's a legit question.
Playing short last year. They were talking about moving Monster over from second to
Monster.
Short.
Stephen Milam, I love Milam. I think he's one of the most decorated and exciting and fun second baseman in the country. I would think Braswell is probably going to play shortstop, and Daniel Dickinson. Yeah, and Dickinson's going to play third. But I guess it bleeds the question for me, can you win a national title with, and this is no hit on Braswell, a fairly ordinary defensive shortstop? Because you need to have a lot of talent up the middle of the field. And I think Milam makes up for maybe some of Braswell's limited range moving to his left. But yeah, I mean, that's my question is, do they have enough dynamic glove ability at shortstop to smother those tough ground balls late in games that can extend a drive or extend a conga line. We've seen football season, man.
Yeah, it's still football season. Listen, definitely all legitimate questions. I think those are going to be answered. Just that's also why it's nice to have a guy like Jay Johnson. You bank on him figuring it out. And for all my bettors out there, like I said, 12-1 FanDuel LSU is the best you're going to get right now. I've taken a piece of them to start. I think this team is going to be awesome. I really do, especially once they get clicking. The other teams,
about Virginia. You talking about Virginia?
Took the words out of my mouth, man. Yeah. The Virginia Cavaliers round off my third team that I'm highlighting this year. My tier one teams that I think are legitimate threats and the best of the class: Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, and Virginia. The Virginia Cavaliers, by the way, 24-1 on FanDuel, by far the best number you're going to get. Also have taken
24-1.
Yeah, they're 20-1 or lower everywhere else. So I've taken some shots on them. There's 15-1. Yeah, so it's going to correct itself. And by the way, DraftKings, who is usually the first and is usually giving the best numbers and not limiting you, they're sleeping. I don't know where they are coming out with their odds, but I did the college experience. My guys, Noah and Colby. Shout out Noah and Colby. We were talking about the ACC the other day, doing an ACC preview. They're like, "Oh, who do you think's the best team? Who's going to win the conference?" I'm like, "Well, I love UNC. I think UNC is going to have a great team this year, but my team is Virginia. Virginia, year after year, for anybody that doesn't follow the sport, has a top 5 lineup every single year. This season, they might not have a batter hitting below 300.
Yeah,
it's
disgusting.
Crazy. It's disgusting. I mean, and this is a team that lost Griff O'Farrell. They lose Ethan Anderson, anchoring that lineup. Griff O'Farrell had one of the highest batting averages in the country last year. He went to Baltimore. I think he was maybe what, Joe? You would know this, the 33rd pick.
That sounds Orioles. Spot on. I think you hit the number on the head.
But yet again, like head coach Brian O'Connor is able to do, he knows how to build a lineup. And we've seen this before. Virginia has always got one of the best lineups, and my knock on them in the past, why I don't pick them to win, is because the pitching. But this year, I've read some D1 baseball reports how Brian O'Connor thinks this is the best pitching staff he's had in years. You have Evan Blanco coming back, who is very good, and he was really good down the stretch, anchoring the Friday night role. Jay Woolfolk, who was a starter, then a closer, then turned back into a starter. He's got the stuff. He's a little erratic. If he can lock down, some of this command issues, he can be very good. And presumably he might be the Saturday night guy to start the season. You know, these things change throughout the year. But the guy they're really excited about, Chris Arroyo, two-way player, might be doing the Cags role, the Sunday guy, pitching on Sunday, playing first base, during the weekend series. They have a ton of arms, even though they lost some pitchers like Joe Savino and Angelo Tonis, a key bullpen piece. They've kind of replenished that side of the ball to where, Virginia's pitching just has to be slightly above average. With the offense they have led by Henry Ford, who's one of my favorite picks for Golden Spikes, we'll get to in that a little bit later. Harrison Didewick, Eric Becker, Henry Godbout, Jacob Ferencz, just to name a few. I think Virginia being probably the class of the ACC and having a top 3, possibly number 1 lineup in the country this year to go along with what's expected to be a much improved pitching staff, combined with the fact that they're 24-1 right now. Like, I think Virginia is going to be a team that's going to be playing ball in late June.
Yeah, I mean, he might be underselling his offense, to be totally honest with you. I mean, Eric Becker is one of the best players in the country, and he's not draft eligible until 2026. But Henry Ford, Henry Godbout, like you mentioned, Chris Arroyo is going to hit nukes. Harrison Didewick, Jacob Ferencz, like you'd mentioned. The thing I really like about this Virginia lineup, and it's the way Virginia has just been the last few years, is they have a tremendous blend of guys that put the ball in play and guys that absolutely smoke the baseball. And they're always 7 or 8 guys deep. And, last year was a perfect example. You think they have a good offense, and then Henry Ford, as a true freshman, shows up, and you're like, oh my God, like this team didn't need Henry Ford. And they've got one of the best sluggers in the country, and we didn't even know about him coming into the season. So, and I'll say this too. I think Virginia, they might be underselling their pitching staff too, because Chris Arroyo is going to be nice. Aiden Teal was a great arm last year. Evan Blanco's back. He's going to pitch big innings. But I think we're not talking about Jack O'Connor enough. I mean, Jack O'Connor went down and didn't pitch at all last season, if I'm not mistaken. And reports this fall was he was touching 99 as a 6'6", 240-pound righty who was a weekend. I got to remind people, Jack O'Connor was a weekend starter as a true freshman in 2023. Yeah. So, and then we'll see what they end up doing with Jay Woolfolk. He could pitch midweek. He could close out games. They've got a lot of guys at Virginia, and it's kind of like LSU. I wonder who's going to play shortstop. I haven't done a lot of reading in terms of who's. Maybe it's Luke Hansen. I'm not sure. Maybe Eric Becker gets a shot to play shortstop. I'll be interested to see who ends up playing up the middle for that team. But they're gonna, again, it's gonna be a team that hits like 315 as a team. They're gonna score 10 runs night in and night out, and I think they've got more pitching than a lot of people give them credit for.
Yeah, completely agree. That's why, in my research preseason, I've dubbed Virginia as one of my key 3 teams. I think now moving over, Joe, to like that second tier of teams that I think are pretty good, that, if some things go their way and if some guys step up into big roles, like, I'd put probably UNC, Texas, Georgia, maybe Arkansas in that second tier. We're like, okay, they've got some talent. If this happens, then they can be making a deep run. I think the team I would like to highlight is probably Georgia, and off the rip, like, I didn't think Georgia was going to be a team that I'd really like or consider to make a deep run. And I still do have my reservations, which is why I tier 2 them. But you have Trey Phelps, a guy who could be a Golden Spikes contender this year. You have Nolan McCarthy coming over from Kentucky. You have Devin Obie coming over from Duke. The lineup is always going to hit, even though you lose Golden Spikes winner Charlie Kahn and you lose Corey Collins, who is an under the radar player. Not statistically he was nuts, but a guy who wasn't
from
really
a draft
talked
perspective.
About. Yeah, from a draft perspective. Might have went to the Mets actually. their pitching is something that was always the issue last year. They blew a lot of late leads, but they bring in a guy who's uber talented, very well, Alton Davis over from Alabama, to kind of anchor that back end of the bullpen. They have Colton Smith, uber talented. They have Charlie Goldstein coming back, who always kind of seemed, to be the anchor of that staff. You have Leighton Finley, who's got good stuff. You have a couple guys in the bullpen. So I feel like a team like Georgia, who has also taken a lot of steam, Joe, 31-1 on FanDuel is the best you're going to find. Everywhere else, they're starting to get hit 20-1 or less. And I do agree. I think Georgia's got a lot of juice this year. And if their pitching pans out, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with again. But they're probably, I would say, a little bit below that tier one, just because there's a handful of what ifs with them.
Yeah, I agree with you. 31-1 is crazy. Like I said, I'm not a betting man, but that's a wild number for Georgia. A team that had the most successful transfer portal, winter or fall or summer, however you want to, categorize it, of anyone. They're going to score runs, man. Trey Phelps, like you said, I'm a big Ryan Black fan, out of UTSA. I think he's coming out of, transferred into Georgia. He's a perfect conga line second baseman. He can play shortstop in a pinch. Devin Obie is a monster. I'm a big fan of what's the name of their catcher? Hunter Henry or Henry Hunter or
Henry Hunter. Henry Hunter.
Yeah, it is. It's Henry Hunter. I always get him mixed up with the Patriots tight end. It's like, why do parents do this to us? But anyways, yeah, big fan of Georgia's lineup. I actually think that their pitching staff might be kind of the strength of this team. They don't have any household names. They don't have any household names yet besides maybe Alton Davis. He's going to have to throw more strikes, but Colton Smith was really good last year. JT Quinn and Leighton Finley are both very, very good arms. It's not talked about enough, but Brian Curley came over from VCU, and he is just like, hey, if things aren't going well, coach, I'll give you 75 innings this year. Like, I'll find a way to give you 75 innings this year. And then the kid everyone needs to know about at Georgia, who is 2026 draft eligible, I think he's probably going to pitch out of the bullpen, but in the same vein as Chase Shores, Jordan Stevens is up to 102 miles an hour, and he did it on a 40-degree day. Like, Jordan Stevens, and he's 6'6", I think, 6'5". Anytime you have the capability to deploy something like that at the end of the game, now Georgia might not score as many runs as they scored last year, but you could make a pretty compelling case that they might have a top 25 pitching staff and a top 25 offense this year, but they are going to need more from Colby Branch and Slade Alford and Robbie Burnett and some of these guys that are a little bit further down the totem pole that, should hit 6, 7, 8, 9. But they've got pieces, man. They've got pieces. And, Wes Anderson out there, he's a really, really good leader of men. I wouldn't bet against Georgia at all.
Yeah, completely agree. That's why I think Georgia's a team, they're going to be a fun bet throughout the year. Like on weekend series, they're going to be a team that I'll probably look to be backing a lot, especially early in the year. I'm going to talk about I'm going to highlight one more team I want your opinion on. And this could go either way. You might like them, you might not like them. Okay. What are you feeling about the Texas Longhorns, the Jim Schlossnagle move? Coming over to the SEC, playing the Big 12 versus the SEC is much different, but this is a team that has a lot of talent, and they're bringing in a coach that knows what it takes to make a run in Omaha.
Yeah, and they're bringing in one of the best pitching coaches in the country in Max Wiener. I mean, that guy has done everything you can do in terms of, pitching evaluation and pitch design, and he's 29, 30 years old. He's been a pitching coach at the professional level. He's been a pitching coach on one of the better pitching staffs at A&M. But he does have his work cut out for him this year. I don't know if Texas is going to have enough arms to break through that national championship ceiling. I'm a big Jared Spencer fan coming over from Indiana State. I think he's going to be great. Big fan of Connor McCreary coming over from South Carolina. I think he does some things with the baseball that are really unique. And I do think that Texas is going to score a decent amount of runs with Max Bellew and Jalen Flores coming back. Easton Winfield's coming in. He's a really good player. And, if they can get Will Gasparino to tap into his enormous ceiling, it was pretty unpolished last year, but the ceiling is just enormous. If they can get him turning into that guy that looks like a top 15 pick in 2026, like a lot of people think, they've got a chance to make a run. But in terms of having the bullets and having the ammo necessary to compete with some of the bigger dogs in college baseball, I don't think this is the year for the Longhorns. Now, if you ask me today, and these bets aren't available, but if you ask me today who my favorite would be to win the national championship in 2027, and I know it's forever away, it would be Texas by a pretty wide margin right now. That's how much I believe in the future of that program.
Well, that's why we bring you on, because we're able to have that in. So everybody make sure you lock in the Texas Longhorns for College World Series in 2027. I will add, Max Bailu, I'm a huge fan of, and I love Max Bailu this year. He's one of my key 3 guys for Golden Spikes. He's the favorite. He's more of the favorite. He's one of the favorites on Bet Rivers right now. I gave him out at 15-1 a couple weeks ago. Bet Rivers is the only site right now that's offering Golden Spikes. I'm sure a couple more will add them, as the season nears. So I bet him down from 15-1. He's currently 8-1. He's the 3rd favorite. I think Max Bailu is going to have a monster year. The transition to the SEC is interesting, provided he can kind of keep the strikeouts and the swing and miss under control, because that just kills your profile. But I think Bailu is going to figure it out, because the kid is awesome.
I'll give you one really quick before we move. If I was throwing I don't even want to call it a Hail Mary, because I'm a big fan of this team, I would throw Oklahoma State a bone this year. I'm a big fan of what they've been able to do in the portal and some of the guys that they're bringing back. Gabe Davis, Shung Youngerman, Ryan Ewer, Harrison Bodendorf, and I guess that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for their arms. And they've got some guys in 2026 that will contribute this year as well. But Oklahoma State, sneaky amount of talent on the mound, and anytime you can return, Nolan Schubert and Braden Smith can set the top of that lineup, and we'll see whether or not it comes together for Jason Jones and Aiden Miola this year. But they've got a lot of pieces that could make a pretty good run, a pretty interesting run in the Big 12.
75-1 Oklahoma State is. I actually had a piece of them at 60-1 last year. I thought they would be able to get out of their own region. They couldn't. They always seem to have talent. And now with Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12, they are the favorite to win. There are some good teams in that conference, especially with the expansion of a couple Pac-12 teams coming in. I do worry about them, because even though they have talent, they always just seem to choke at the foothold of the tournament.
Never comes together. It never seems to click. They never get hot. And I can't believe I forgot his name. For me, he's a first-round pick in 2026. Avery Ortiz, shortstop at Oklahoma State, one of the most underrated players in the country. If you get a chance to watch him, go watch him. Avery Ortiz.
You're not going to find this information anywhere else, guys, so make sure you listen up here. Before we move on to the players that might surprise you, is there anybody, is there a team or two that you're down on this year that, is kind of getting a lot of helium, but you don't think is going to live up to the billing?
That's a good question. I would say a team that I have question marks about would be Oregon. They're getting a lot of love. They are on the older side. I think they had a really nice transfer portal season. I'm not, Grayson Grinsell and Jason Reitz are interesting pitching prospects. They have never had dominant stuff. They do return Drew Smith and Jacob Walsh, who I think and Jeffrey Hurd as well, who they can bang. I don't know if that roster is going to be deep enough to substantiate some of the lofty goals that they've currently got. Maddox Maloney is going to play shortstop for him, and he's one of the most underrated players in the country. But I don't know. You tell me, what are the odds on Oregon right now? They seem a little short for me.
You mean, they're too shorted to win? Oregon's 80-1 to win it all. So that's deep.
Okay, it is.
But
deep.
I'll say this: they are 2-1 to win the Big Ten this year. I don't understand it. I mean, Nebraska's 7-1. I think I'd probably lean in more on Nebraska. I wouldn't be surprised if a Penn State is able to put it together this year in the conference. Bryce Molinaro is a dog. Shout out to my guys. We have a college fantasy baseball draft I think we have 8 teams this year. We expanded it from 5 a season ago, and I made sure I got Bryce Molinaro on my team.
Yeah, they got a shortstop over there named Ryan Weingartner that is I have that thread going on Twitter right now with the most underrepresented ballers in the country that nobody's talking about. I talked about Bryce Molinaro because he's the Penn State guy, but where did Ryan Weingartner come out of, like St. Joseph or St. Joe's or something? He transferred in, absolute dog, and they bring in Paxton Kling as well. So they've got some pieces at Penn State and they're going to be tough, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think Penn State, who, by the way, like I gave them out 40-1 as a taste to win the Big 12, the Big 10. I think there was, it's a little
40-1 to win the conference.
Yes,
dang,
regular season, not conference. Title.
Yeah, that's long. I would
take that bet down a little bit, but yeah, to me it didn't make sense. I'm like, the Big 10 is always a toss up. Nebraska is probably, in my opinion, the best team on paper right now, but
but in any case, the Oregon love, they had a nice run they've had a nice run the last few years. I don't know if it's there this year. That actually brings up the talking point, and we don't have to go into detail of it. I mentioned Oklahoma State. I think Oregon State is slept on pretty hard too. It might be another team that's a year away, but Oregon State has a lot of ammunition up there in Corvallis.
They were one of my teams last year and they let me down. Nobody decided to hit in the Kentucky region. It was brutal. I don't want to get too caught up on it because we could break down literally every team. We could talk about every team, but in terms of maybe players that might surprise you, I know you had the thread going. Is there somebody maybe in that thread that you didn't mention that is going to have a big jump this year? We saw guys like Durangelo Sanger and Christian Moore, who I've watched in real time. For Sanger, for instance, he was a guy who had a ton of problems with his command. Started as the Friday guy who got worked into the bullpen because he wasn't hacking at the switch pitcher. Ends up going top 15 to the Mariners, and then I don't think there's many players that made a bigger jump from 23 to 24 than Durangelo Sanger. Absolute superstar, top 10. And the same thing, Christian Moore. Christian Moore had a very good 23, but in 2024, as good of a 23 as he had, the jump he made last year is off the charts. Who's a guy you think can do something like that this year?
The name that immediately comes to mind, and he's not so far deep down draft boards, but I think Merrick Houston is going to have a pretty big jump. You put 15 pounds on that kid this summer and this fall, and all of a sudden, he's bringing back shades of Dansby Swanson. So if you're talking about a Gold Glove shortstop playing in the ACC, and maybe he's capable of hitting 15 homers and stealing 15 bags, 20 bags, in this climate in college baseball, I don't think that's enough to win you a Golden Spikes award unless he is the guy that makes the engine go on a national championship contending Wake Forest team. There's probably going to be a guy that hits 30 bombs on a good team that is the Golden Spikes guy. But in terms of a guy that I think could make an enormous jump from what he's posted in previous years, it would probably be Houston. The arm that I want to talk about, and a lot of guys might know this guy already, but J.D. Thompson at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is another team that's kind of on the come up. They're still trying to navigate the waters of NIL and how different everything is after the Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker era out there. J.D. Thompson can do some things with the baseball. Hitters just can't see him. They just cannot see that fastball, and he's going to be leaned on really hard on Fridays or Saturdays in Nashville. So those are the two guys that I think from a pure statistical standpoint might make enormous jumps. Those are the two guys for me that really stand out.
Yeah, I love the J.D. Thompson. I think J.D. Thompson's going to be I think he's got a legitimate shot to be one of the 5 best starters in college.
I totally agree. Yes.
I watched him a lot last year. I saw his maturation as a young player in the conference tournaments and in other late games where in the season where he's just lights out. The stuff is awesome. Lefty. I think J.D. Thompson's going to be big. For me, I talked about Chase Shores. I think Chase Shores could really make a jump. And, obviously it's hard because he didn't pitch last year, so you don't really know what you're going to get. Basically 2 years without stepping foot on a mound in a real game. But I think Chase Shores is that guy. The stuff is the fastball is elite. I think it would continue, like you said, to develop that secondary stuff, but more importantly, the command, especially for college. We've seen it on a lot of different cases where in the sport of college baseball, you just need 2 really good pitches and you can be one of the best starters. Like how many times we've seen Paul Skeens, live off fastball slider for the whole season. Chase Burns live off fastball slider. Hagen Smith live off fastball slider. So, I think Chase Shores is going to be one of those guys for sure. And I would like to say another pitcher I have curiosities towards, because now they're transferring in a conference. They're transferring into the Big Ten, is Matt Scott. I would say I'm probably not as high on Matt Scott at the moment as some of these like MLB.com mock drafts where like they have him listed in the back end of the first round. But like he has legitimate stuff. But the issue is he can get hit because the command isn't sharp or he can't control his pitches necessarily. And that was in the Pac-12. Now he's going into a better conference in the ACC. So I want to see how it translates for him. This is a guy who right now I wouldn't mock as a first rounder. I'd probably have him in the mid-second. But if he puts it together, I could definitely see him being probably one of like the first 8 or 9 pitchers college-wise being called off the board this year.
Yeah, I think the issue with Matt Scott is it's almost the Stanford way. Like he throws too many strikes, but he just doesn't miss bats. And the metrics on his stuff are good. The command on his stuff is pretty good. He's got size. He just hasn't been able to miss bats, which is kind of strange for a guy that's been up to 98 with pretty good vert on that fastball. Yeah. So it might just be one of those things where he just doesn't hide the baseball terribly well. There's nothing supremely unique about his look. Like you look at a guy like Jamie Arnold, and it's like hitters have never seen that coming at them. So when it's generic, it can get hit a little bit, and maybe that's what's going on with Matt Scott. But he's always had the building blocks and the clay to be an absolute first-team star, Golden Spikes award-winning type caliber arm. We'll see whether it comes together. And there are other guys like that too. Gabe Davis is in that exact same boat. James Ellwinger is in that exact same boat. We'll see who kind of reins it in and starts missing more bats.
Yeah, well said. I know, we've touched on so many teams and players and, kind of transitioning into that. Joe, Golden Spikes candidates, I was thrilled. I hit Charlie Condon last year. I bet him second week of the season once I saw that run he got on. The Golden Spikes have changed, and this is the second year the award is being offered, being able to bet this market. And like I said, Bet Rivers right now is the only spot where you can find it. Because it's not as well known of an award to like the overall sports landscape, and it's not something that you were able to bet on before last year. People don't really understand the path and what it takes to win. And in doing research last year, I've developed a formula that puts certain guys in a basket that gives them a much better chance to win. There's a certain criteria. It's like a checklist. And before we get into who you think is going to win, I'm going to talk about it because if you go back and look at the last 15 winners, a lot of them have followed this formula. Number one, stay away from pitcher-only guys. I think only two pure pitchers have won in the last 12, 13 years, and realize that the game has changed so much even in the last 5 years. Paul Skeens didn't win it 2 years ago. It's kind of hard for him, for another pitcher to win. Number two, got to be a Power 5, now a Power 4 conference player. Mid-majors almost never win. I think Kyle Mercer might have been the last one in 20 or Kyle Lewis from Mercer in 2016 might have been the last one. Yeah, you have to have a guy that's draft eligible. Almost every single winner in the last 10 years has been draft eligible. You have to have a guy that's going to be probably projected around a first-round pick who's got a lot of juice and a lot of helium. You have to be on a team that's probably going to be making the postseason. You see in the NFL all the time, like, Joe Burrow had a fantastic year, but he didn't make the playoffs. He's not going to get the MVP. So kind of follows the same suit. So that's like kind of the prerequisites. Then you get into the actual statistical profiles of these guys. If you've looked at it, like Adley Rutschman, Dylan Cruz, who won it last year, Charlie Condon, all these guys are hitting 400 or better. Now, what I've noticed is the target is to be like right there at 400 or over 400 with about 30 plus home runs nowadays. You know, you saw Melendez win it with like a 380 average and 32 home runs. So if you're batting 380 or more, but you have 30 plus bops, you're batting, say, you know, in the low fours, but you have like 20 home runs. Those are the kind of guys to target. That's what I've developed, and Charlie Condon was one of those guys. And, you know, it's not always a foolproof plan. You look at Jack Caglione. He batted .417 and 33 home runs and carried Florida to the College World Series, and he wasn't even a finalist, which is a travesty, by the way.
Nutty.
So with that being said, if we're looking at the guys here, Jace Lavalette, 4-1. Clearly, Lava Boy he's a dog. I mean, he's going to be a guy that I would imagine is going to be a finalist. The one issue on him, he's got a little bit of the swing and miss, but that average has to get up from what it was last year. He's got to be flirting in the 380s. I think Lavalette could be definitely hitting 35 home runs this year. But if he's batting like 375, 380, and he's got 35 bops, I think he's going to be an absolute horse to win it, especially considering the first overall, pick on him.
Yeah.
Jamie Arnold, 6-1 pitcher. You know, we covered that. I love Arnold. Next, Chris Sale, but that's tough. Bailu, 8-1, was 15. I think Bailu's kind of in that bucket. You know, first round talent, going to be on a team that's going to make a lot of noise, going to have a lot of stats. So I think Bailu's interesting. But then some of these get a little wonky, like Cam Canarella. I don't know if he's going to have enough stats to do it. I like Cam, especially at 10-1. That's a little interesting. Is there somebody maybe I haven't mentioned that you're looking at for a Golden Spikes candidacy?
Well, two things. I would stay away from Canarella for the Golden Spikes, and the only reason I say that is because it remains to be seen if they're going to even let him steal bases this year. And he's not a power guy, and Clemson doesn't project to be a serious force this year, so that's a tough one for me. I do have some reservations about Bailu. I think he's a really good player, but he might have just been exhausted. He had a really tough go on the Cape with like a 34% strikeout rate and 222. And so I would expect that he bounces back from that and doesn't repeat that. The guys that I'm looking at, one, I think more people should be paying attention to Dean Curley at Tennessee. He's going to be right in the middle of a Tennessee lineup next year that projects to score a lot of runs, and he showed some serious raw power last year. He didn't have any holes in his swing. He hit 12 homers last year, 285, 386, 502. I expect that to make a really large jump this season. So Dean Curley would be, and I like giving guys with long odds because I think that's how I would bet. The other two guys that I would circle, and the only questions with these guys are, can they provide enough defensive value to supplement what they do at the plate? Trey Phelps at Georgia is going to be a monster offensively. And we've seen what that Georgia ballpark can do for hitters. The other one is Henry Ford at Virginia. Henry Ford's got a chance to hit 25, 30 homers, right? Yep. And he's shifting over to right field instead of playing first base, which should, in theory, only help his profile. If I was looking for like long odds, if I was looking for a chance to make a good return on my investment, those would be the three guys that I would be circling.
So I completely agree with you on Canarella. I agree with you on Ford. We talked about him. Ford's one of the guys that I gave out already, and I fired away on. Dean Curley, I took a look at, but truth be told, even in a Tennessee lineup, I don't know if he's going to have the batting average. I know he started getting a lot more at-bats later in the year, but, batting 285 last year, which is fine in college, 12 home runs, you'd expect him to probably say add 10 more home runs, 22 home runs. That's a reasonable jump this year.
I think he could hit more than that, man. I think there was a lot of batted ball luck last year, and I'm one of those guys that goes super deep into the metrics. I mean, this guy had, if not the best whiff rate against fastballs last year in the SEC. It was like top 3, top 5. You can't get a fastball by him. And the slider makeup just got better and better and better as the year went on. And this is as a true freshman in the SEC, batting in the middle of a lineup for a team trying to fight for a national championship. So I think he's going to click into another gear this year. But I can totally see as a better the reservations on putting money on a guy that hit 285.
Yeah, the average is what sells me, because like Tennessee it's like Wake Forest, it's a bandbox. The ball flies out of that ballpark.
Yep.
And the Vols lineup is almost always one of the best every year. So that's my only reservations about Curley, and the fact that he's only 25-1. On a guy like him who really last year he didn't have like a jump off the screen season. I was a little disappointed that he's only 25-1.
I would agree with that.
In addition to Bailu and Ford, 2 of my key 3. You know who I bet down from 75-1, and I couldn't believe it. Bet him down to 75-1 to 50-1, came down to 40. Now he's at 30. That price is still double what it should be. Nolan Schubart. Schubart has every single prerequisite that I mentioned. He's going to be a first rounder. He's going to be a guy that's probably playing in June. I'd be surprised if Oklahoma State doesn't make the tournament. That'd be, I would say, probably a big upset. This is a guy who might have the most raw power in this year's draft. 6'5", 225 Adonis, who batted .370 last season with 23 home runs. I don't know how this guy doesn't take the step forward if he stays healthy. If he stays healthy, I'm expecting at least a 400 average with maybe the most home runs. Like I think, especially the way the ball flies out of Oklahoma State, I think 35 home runs is definitely within reason for Schubart this year. So if he's putting those kind of numbers, he's going to be there. And the fact that the price, what I got him at 75-1, I maxed out. I physically am not allowed to bet anymore on Nolan Schubart. That's how much I put on him.
I respect it. He is going to be a numbers guy. I just, we haven't really seen a player that strikes out as much as Schubart does take home that trophy. And I could be mistaken. Even Ivan Melendez cut his strikeout numbers way down in 2021, whenever that was. So, my only reservation is going to be, can he shrink that strikeout rate like Chase Davis did in 2023, for example? And if he does, dude, if he shrinks the strikeout totals down, he could hit 35 this year. He could be the guy that breaks Caglianone's record. It's just the baseball is flying so far in college baseball right now that it wouldn't surprise me if someone rebroke that record this season.
And let me tell you something with Schubart, and this is kind of went into my handicap. So he played 61 games as a freshman, and he hit 17 homers and batted .338. Struck out 75 times in those 61 games, or only 43 walks. Still overall, especially as a freshman, that's a pretty good year. Then last year he only played 49 games. He had 40 less at-bats, batted .370 with a 1350, 1.352 OPS, 23 bops. This guy played less games. His numbers went up. But what also went down was the strikeouts. He struck out 62 times and walked 49. So I'm expecting if that trend continues, the strikeouts regress, the walks go up, the swing and miss isn't as egregious. I completely agree. But like for my money, for my opinion, I think Nolan Schubart should be more in the 15-1 territory. I think this guy is off the hook. Trey Phelps was 75-1. He's down to 40-1. I think Phelps is definitely a guy I'm going to be taking a look at, but I want to see other books come out before I fire away. 2 guys I did want to ask you about because they're outside of that basket, if you will. And it's appealing to me to ask. Don't love the odds on him, but Drew Burress 15-1. Obviously not draft eligible this year. He could very well be the number 1 pick next year. They got the kid Grady Emerson from high school who's going to be in the running as well, probably. But Drew Burress batted over .380 with 25 homers as a freshman last year. That is right on pace with what Charlie Condon did as a sophomore. And you saw what Condon did from from the jump from sophomore year to junior year. Burris reasonably could do that. Where do you rank Burris on a team that might not even make the tournament, on a player that might not, it is not draft eligible? Where would you put him, maybe not odds-wise, but realistically, to win this award?
I mean, my only question is, I'm trying to think back to the last second-year player to win that award. I mean, you can jog my mind, but I'm having a hard time remembering the last guy to win it as a second-year player in college baseball. Burris is fascinating. That Georgia Tech team is going to be better than they were last year. It's just this is nothing against Drew Burris, right? It's hard for me to bet down money on a 5'8" outfielder at Georgia Tech to win the Golden Spikes Award in his second year in college baseball. Now, maybe, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I guess I would just say there would be other players that I would be more invested in. At some point, you have to start pitching around Drew Burris, because that is not a lineup that should scare the hell out of people. And Drew Burris is a superstar. So I would not give him anything to hit.
And especially when you consider what the odds are, like if Burris was maybe like 30-1, it's somebody that I would take a shot on. Like last year, for instance, Joe, and I knew this, and I was vocal about this on my Twitter account. Like Jace Lavalette at times was 100-1 last year, 75-1. And I'm like, I know he's probably not going to win, but when you saw what he did as a freshman and the maturity and the growth from last year, like it could surprise me, because this is a guy I felt like if they let him steal more, like I think he was a 20-20 guy as a freshman. Like maybe this is a guy that could be 30-20, a 30-20 guy with a 360 average, like that kind of story, which is, maybe an outlier. But the other outlier I'm interested in is a mid-major guy, which kind of breaks that.
I already know who you're going to say. I know who. Tanner Thatch.
Yep.
Yeah. Listen, man, like UNC, is it UNC Wilmington? What does a guy at UNC Wilmington need to do to win the Golden Spikes Award?
Hit 40, probably.
Hit 40 and hit 415, which don't get me wrong is totally possible. But here's the other thing about Thatch. UNC Wilmington isn't a deep enough lineup where they can give him nights off against lefties. And he had a pretty big hole in his swing against left-handed pitching last year. And, college pitching is getting more and more diversified with left-handed starters. I just wonder if he's going to get enough plate appearances against right-handed pitching to put up such monstrous numbers that makes it make sense. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but you got to have such a Barry Bonds-like season at UNC Wilmington to be in the conversation. I don't see it, but again, with any of these kids, I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah, no, just kind of thinking outside the box. If there's anybody else that I would be interested in, I mean, because you could say,
well, let me give you one. What about Ethan Petrie?
Ethan Petrie was a guy I liked, and I remember saying this to myself at the end of last season. I wrote a list of guys that I liked coming into this year, and this was obviously way before odds came out. Lavalette, Max Bailu, Petrie. There was maybe somebody else. So I really like Petrie. This is a guy who's kind of being forgot about. He had a down year last year. South Carolina wasn't very good. Petrie before last season was being mocked as maybe a top 3 guy coming into the 2025 draft. And listen, Ethan Petrie's a dog. Like Ethan Petrie's a fantastic player. This is a guy that took Paul Skeens 450 dead center to Pound Town. But the one thing why I'm hesitant on betting Petrie, odds-wise, he's only 13-1. And listen, I understand it. I'm not saying it's a bad number in terms of like,
South Carolina's not good enough to take a 13-1 on Ethan Petrie.
Exactly.
Well, let me pivot then. I don't know the odds on this guy, but my big sleeper for the Golden Spikes is Max Williams at Florida State. He would be a guy that if you could get, that would be a guy that if you got long odds, if you could get 80-1 on Max Williams or 75-1 on Max Williams, that would be a worthwhile use of your time.
I mean, it's something I can ask, because I Henry Ford originally wasn't on the Bet Rivers odds, and I emailed them about that, or DM'd them about that. So Max Williams interests me. This is a guy that, is a lot of talent, and with so much of their production gone from last year, he's going to be called on to do a lot. You lose Cam Smith, James Tibbs, Jaime Ferrer, Cantu, Marco Dingus. So Max Williams has got to be that guy, that catalyst in center field, the guy at the top of the lineup. So, listen, I think for a longer shot, he's appealing. The thing is, though, I'd probably wait to see what Williams does to start. Like, if Williams maybe got off to a hot start, maybe, I'd be interested in taking a sprinkle on him. Transitioning more to the draft, Joe. I know this is your specialty. You love this. Like, you live for the MLB draft. Talk to me about what you might expect before this season starts, because you follow the high school guys more than I do. I don't really follow high school that much. I'm more into it with college in the weeds every weekend and stuff like that. How do you see this draft unfolding, with finding out that Washington's going to be number 1, the Angels are going to be 2, the Mariners 3, the Rockies 4, etc.?
Yeah, I think this is a year where, like the Henry Davis year, we're going to see a pretty big underslot deal at number 1. I personally don't see a franchise-altering player in this draft right now. I see a lot of players that are very good players and will come up and contribute pretty quickly. But I don't see I don't see the Dylan Cruz. I don't see the Wyatt Langford. I don't see guys that just don't have a hole in their game. So to answer your question, I would expect that the Nationals probably go under slot with the number 1 pick. And then, the Angels are going to angel. They're probably going to pick a guy that can help out this year or very early in 2026. That could be a pitcher. It could be a bat. There's going to be plenty of options there. I think the biggest question for me right now is who is the top high school player in this class? I think for a lot of people, it's Ethan Holiday. That is not the case for me. I have Ethan Holiday at number 8 on my big board. I think he has some questions that he needs to answer this year. Billy Carlson is a shortstop out of Los Angeles, Southern California. As we've seen, the Southern California high school shortstop always goes very high in the draft, and he's super talented. So, and then you got guys like Xavier Nyans and Eli Willits and a couple of high school pitchers and Seth Hernandez and Cam Appenzeller that I think could end up in the top 10 picks. But yeah, the biggest narrative for me this year is I question whether or not this draft is going to have a unanimous, no doubt, number 1 talent at the top. And the other part of that is who is high school player number 1.
And it's interesting because last year, and listen, I know we had a disagreement about this, and I still don't get it how Travis Bazzana went 1 last year. And legitimately, there was 6 other college guys that could have went ahead of him. The college class last year was disgusting towards the top. I personally think Jack Caglione should have went 1. I think 5 other teams are going to realize, not that they messed up, but realize we really let this guy go. We really let this guy slide down to number 6 to Kansas City. We always think about this kind of stuff before the season starts. And then when it unfolds, it starts to crystallize more. I think Lavalette, obviously, for the immense, potential he's got. I mean, I think he's a college Matt Olson, and I think he's only going to get better, especially as he matures as a hitter. Freak athlete, can play center field at 6'6". So I understand, why he would go 1. And I do agree with you, the slot value, and people don't understand. It's not like the NFL draft. Slot value is such a key piece of determining the draft, especially when it comes time to bet on it, because you have to fill out your entire draft in a allotted amount of money. And there's a lot of good players that you might be able to sign later, and you have to pay them a little bit more money. And in the first round, I mean, almost everybody's good. You're almost always getting a at least talented player. For Washington, listen, I understand taking Lavalette 1. I really do. But for a team that doesn't have a legitimate ace, their loaded farm system is with hitting. And they have guys that are going to be a surplus at a position like Yohani Morales. I thought the guy should have been a top 15 pick last 2 years ago.
I had him as a top 20 pick as well.
And they got him at 40. That was a steal. But what did they do with him? I mean, he's a third baseman. He made big strides defensively in Miami. but they might put Brady House there, and Morales has to go play first. And they have C.J. Abrams for the moment. They have Dylan Cruz. They have James Wood. And listen, adding Lavalette to that outfield would make it one of the most juiciest outfields I think I've ever seen. But they need a pitcher. And obviously, Kate Cavalli was a guy that I was kind of counting on, but coming off Tommy John, he hasn't pitched in 2 years. You don't know what you're going to get. Mackenzie Gore is their guy. They need an arm. And that's almost why I could see like a Jamie Arnold go 1 if he has that big year that we're expecting. It wouldn't surprise me. But like Ethan Holiday, because it's not just who's going 1, it's where they're going. What does that team need? And Washington is a team that's kind of building to win in the next couple years. So like Ethan Holiday's very good, but you said he's got holes in his game. Like, where are they going to put him? So personally, I think Ethan Holiday is kind of a surplus, and they need pitching. But I'll say this, Joe. Honestly, I just don't understand like the ultra love for Tyler Bremner. I think Bremner's a very good talent, but I think he's a product of he's in a light pitching class college-wise, and he's why he's being mocked so high. Not that he's not good, but this is a guy who was a Saturday, Sunday guy last year in the Big West at Santa Barbara. Like, he's going to slot in as the Friday. He's talented. He's got very good stuff, no doubt about it. So can you explain a little bit more about that for maybe clear something up for me?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Tyler Bremner is, from a scouting perspective, he's 6'2.5", 6'3". He's 185 pounds. That dude is going to put on more weight. He's a tremendous athlete. I wouldn't look at the UCSB thing too much because they had him yo-yoing in different roles. He was pitching in the 6th inning. He was starting. He was closing. He was all over the place. He closes out the year. He goes and pitches in Cary at Team USA, and he absolutely carved through the best hitters in the country with one of the best changeups this is probably one of the best changeups in the last 3 drafts. It's disgusting. A sweeping slider that projects out plus, and he's a lean, loose, athletic body that's already up to 99 miles an hour. So that's a plus fastball. It's a plus sweeper. It's at least a plus changeup. It's 3 pitches. It strikes. It's athletic. Yeah, I mean, you can't hold the UCSB thing against him when you watch him just dominate players from the SEC and the Big West for Team USA. That would be the short end of it. But to kind of piggyback off what you said, in terms of the Nationals, if they believe that Tyler Bremner or Jamie Arnold are one of the, call it 5 best players in the class, I would not be surprised at all if they went with one of those guys on an underslot deal at 1-1.
Makes sense. I think it's a lot more open for interpretation, but I appreciate you clearing that up. Because I watched Tyler Bremner last year, and I'm just like, there's people that are willing to take him over Jamie Arnold, and a lefty who's just got more room to grow as much as any pitching prospect I've seen in the last few years. So appreciate you clearing that up. I do know you have a few more minutes, so I want to talk to you a little bit about the early look for the MLB rookies. We talked off air. I think this is the deepest pitching or the deepest rookie classes in both leagues that we've seen in quite a long time. Who are some guys maybe outside of the favorites, like the favorites for the NL now is Roki Sasaki goes to the Dodgers, Dylan Cruz, Matt Shaw. For the AL, it's going to be Roman Anthony, Jacob Wilson, some Christian Campbell, some of those guys. Who are some other guys that maybe you're taking a look at? Guys that were drafted last year that could come up and make an immediate impact or an impact in the next couple months. Who do you like him?
The National League. Did you mention Matt Shaw already?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I do like Matt Shaw. Yep. Dalton Rushing with the Dodgers is a name that I think isn't getting quite enough love. Will Smith is going to be the guy with the Dodgers, but Dalton Rushing has a chance to eat into some of those at bats. And if you get a Will Smith injury and you find a way to get Dalton Rushing 100 games, and he's catching a majority of the year, I understand that an injury has to happen here. He would be a sneaky one for me because he has the type of power that at Dodger Stadium could result in 28 homers, 25 to 28. So I certainly have him circled in the National League. Did you mention Jason Dominguez already?
He's actually the favorite, Dominguez, in the AL.
Yeah. So I mean, Jason Dominguez might be the starting center fielder for the New York Yankees for 155 games. Like, I don't know how you look at that and go, this isn't. He is so obviously the number one prospect in terms of Rookie of the Year talent that I think it goes without saying. I will say there are two guys that I'm kind of back and forth. Kumar Rocker with the Rangers, I think, is an interesting one. He's going to pitch all year, you would think, out of the Rangers rotation. A Rangers team that should be good again. I would keep an eye on him in terms of, guys that are going to be on good teams that are going to play an important part right out of the gate. The other one, and this is me just kind of taking a gamble. I think there's a universe where Jacob Wilson with Oakland, there's a universe where he could hit 330 and steal 25 bags and play good defense. Now, Oakland is going to have to win 84 or 85 games and surprise some people this year for him to be that guy. But he would be my true dark horse in the American League.
So Jacob Wilson's one of the favorites. And before odds came out a while ago, I was talking about this, like Wilson's going to be a guy that I'm really high on just because of the high floor, doesn't strike out a lot, play platinum glove defense. I'm interested. What do you think about Quinn Matthews? Quinn Matthews, I couldn't believe he was drafted in the 4th round. I felt like maybe the only reason he fell was because of his age and the amount of pitches he's thrown. But like, to me, this guy was should have been a first rounder a couple of years ago. And now, like, he's come out of nowhere, even though he was a stud in college. And now he's on the doorsteps of the major leagues for a team that needs starting pitching, that they do have a lot of young talent, but they don't have like a proven guy at the moment outside of maybe like Sonny Gray.
Yeah, it's interesting that his velocity has jumped with the Cardinals. But, in college, he was 91 to 93. He was 23 years old. It was 4 pitches. It was a ton of strikes. It was big moments. I think he's a great choice. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he earned an opening day roster spot with the Cardinals. Thomas Sagasi is another one out there that could be the full-time third baseman or second baseman for the Cardinals. They really want to get some of those young guys as many at-bats as they can. So betting a Cardinal to win Rookie of the Year, not a bad choice.
I'm interested in that. I was taking a look and it kind of caught my eye. Last one before I let you go here. Where do you put maybe Jack Caglione, who got a spring training invite as a non-roster player? Do you think he could be up this year? If so, when would he be up? And I mean, if he is, you got to take a swing.
Man, I would be stunned if he broke camp with them, especially with Vinny Pasquantino already kind of handling first base. Like, here's the thing: they say that they're going to give Cags run in right field. I love the idea. Not at Kauffman. That is an enormous field. And for a guy that hasn't played the outfield since he was a freshman, and he barely did it then, and he had Tommy John back then, why would you even risk the bat by forcing him to throw again? So I think it's possible that Cags could be up in June if he absolutely blows the doors off of minor league ball, but I wouldn't rush him up that fast. The Royals don't have a need to rush him up that quickly, and let him just season a little bit in pro ball before you throw him to the Wolves.
One more, I promise. Last one. My boy Chase Dollander, a.k.a. Dolly, a guy who I believed was going to be the number 1 pick coming into the 2023 season. He struggles a little bit with command mechanics. Paul Skeens kind of comes out of nowhere to be like one of the most highly touted prospects ever. And Dolly kind of falls out of favor a little bit. But to me, this kid is one of the best pitching prospects in maybe the last 15 plus years. When it was his time in 2020, in his time in 2022, or I'm sorry, 2020.
Well, for the 23 season, yeah.
Yeah, well, late 22, like he was like, wow, this is the next DeGrom, the next Pedro. Where, the Rockies GM and management is saying that he's going to have every chance to make the roster opening day, break with them after camp. Where do you put him maybe overcoming the terrors of pitching in Coors Field like any other pitcher has been able to do?
He's the best pitching prospect in baseball for me. I have him over Jackson Jobe. But the issue with him is for a rookie of the year standpoint, the Rockies might win 72 games this year. They might win 68 games this year. Really hard for me to believe he's going to get enough run support. He's going to get listen, if you're going to pitch at Coors Field, your numbers are already going to be inflated. You would hope that at least you get a little bit of offensive support to help your win-loss record, even though I know that doesn't play into votes. I think there's a universe where Chase Dollander throws a 4.1 ERA, a 3.9 ERA, and goes 7-15, and that's really tough for voters to overcome. So he wouldn't be on my radar for Rookie of the Year, but I expect him to be very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, I was bummed when he got drafted by Colorado. So I'm like, oh, he's got to overcome this. But Joe, amazing stuff as always. I'm so glad you were able to join me tonight and break down some MLB and some college baseball. You do a fantastic job. For anybody that hasn't heard of you, and I don't know who hasn't, tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Twitter at Joe Doyle, MILB. And if you're into college baseball and you're into the draft, I've got a weekly podcast called Overslot at patreon.com/overslot, where we bring on another scouting director every week and talk through amateur baseball at its finest.
Fantastic. If you haven't seen Overslot, make sure you check it out. Joe, amazing stuff. Looking forward to staying in contact with you throughout the year. Have fun. Have fun scouting these guys. Really appreciate the time tonight, my friend. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to come back next week when we break down the conference championships for the NFL. College baseball is coming back. We will be seeing a lot more podcasts. Take it easy. We'll see you next time.